Oh, good morning and thank you for joining us today for our business meeting. This meeting is being recorded. The documents which will be discussed here today are available on the event calendar on our website, which is wmc.wa.gov. I am Amelia Boyd and I am the program manager for the commission. Panelists, please be sure to mute yourself if you are not speaking. Attendees are automatically muted. Please note that anything posted to the chat, which I don't think the chat's available, is considered public record. We will take public comment at this meeting. Once we get to that item, Dr. Murphy will read a script and then ask for public comment. If you would like to comment, please use the raise your hand feature, and then our time for public comment is limited and each speaker is likely to only have about 2 minutes to speak. And with that, I will hand it over to Dr. Murphy for maybe a brief chair report.
So I'll call the meeting to order. Dr. Domino didn't submit a chair report. Is that correct?
I don't have anything.
Yes, so there's no chair report today. So now we'll move to the public comment portion. Is that right, Amelia?
Yes.
We will now begin the public comment section of the business meeting. This is an opportunity for members of the public to address the commission on matters of public concern. Please refrain from using this time to discuss disciplinary cases or topics currently covered by the commission's rulemaking or policy initiatives. If you would like to comment on rules and development, please visit our rules in progress page on our website to ensure your input is considered in the rulemaking process. We also encourage you to participate in our rulemaking workshops and hearings. To provide feedback on commission policies, guidelines, or interpretive statements, you can comment during one of the upcoming policy interested party meetings or policy committee meetings. The schedule for these meetings is available on our website under policy meetings. Additionally, the public may contact staff during normal business hours, and we welcome any written comments at any time. Please note, we will not be answering questions or responding during this period. Staff will be available after the meeting to assist with any inquiries. Each speaker will have 2 minutes. When it is your turn to comment, please state your name and any affiliation. Would anyone like to provide comment at this time?
There are no hands raised. Doesn't look like it.
Okay. Can you move the agenda down? Well, onto the consent agenda. Items listed here are considered routine agency matters and are approved by a single motion without separate discussion. If separate discussion is desired, the item will be removed from the consent agenda and placed on a regular business agenda. First item is the agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the January 10th business meeting agenda?
So moved.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 2 is approval of the October 11, 2024 business minutes. Hopefully you've all had a chance to read those 4 pages. Do we have a motion to approve the business meeting minutes from October 11th?
So moved.
Approve.
And seconded.
Second.
All in favor, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes approved. Okay, on to commissioner training, outside inquiries, and the role of the commissioner. Kyle?
We've got a hand raised. Dr. Jager.
Oh, that's from when we were voting. Sorry.
Okay. And Amelia, I'll start my sharing now.
Okay.
And everyone see the presentation? All right, so thank you for your attention on this. As the legislative session gavels in on this coming Monday, it's always a good idea to cover some basics. So there's some nuance with respect to what your authorities are with as a commissioner and as a member of the medical commission, and I'll get to those in a little bit. So just going over the process, just a high level overview. I mean, if you really want to get into more detail, just Google how a bill becomes a law or the Mr. Bill video, and a helpful PBS YouTube will pop up and show you something that I think is probably from the 70s, but it's still relevant today. We'll go over the ethical and responsibilities and your role as a commissioner, and how to recognize when you are in a role representing the commission versus when you're in your individual capacity. And then finally, I want to emphasize this: opportunities to contribute to the process with the medical commission. We do heavily rely on our commissioners, as most recently as Dr. Curry can attest. We had a training that was supposed to be, I think 45 minutes, and she was gracious enough with her time to stay for like 90 minutes because staff had so many questions. So those are the kind of things where we really rely on your expertise for that. So going over process, the agency itself, DOH, has what I would call a two-step process. They go by division, and then they roll that up to the agency for final recommendation on taking positions on bills. There's many considerations and a lot of feedback in that. You'll notice that the weekly call that used to be in place has been eliminated. DOH decided to stop, or I'm sorry, HSQA decided to stop doing that. So that weekly commitment is no longer there. I can speak if folks want, I can speak a little bit to that. We're not wild about that. That was a good opportunity for direct contribution by commissioners to a larger group and have a multi-specialty discussion, but a multi-profession discussion. But that's not going to be there this week. And then, as you can see, we have a daily bill review that Stephanie attends, and she lodges our opinion on bills in the division level. And then I attend the agency bill review and lodge our opinions on the agency level. So just broadly, I'm not going to read all of these, but these are many of the things that come up when we're looking at bills that are pre-filed. And so pre-filing happens starting December 1. We've already seen, I think, hundreds of bills pre-filed in this December, and on the first day after everything gets gavelled into session, all of those bills will get introduced formally and then referred over to their various committees of jurisdiction for consideration and a hearing. And so the top ones that I can say right now, International Medical Graduates it has a couple of bills. You've seen those concepts. They were presented to you last year. The other ones that are coming through are things like psilocybin. Corporate practice of medicine is making a few waves, and so we're definitely going to be involved in those, and you can probably expect some reach outs to get some opinions on those issues. These are the previous sessions where I'm just giving you brief overviews of 2022 and 2023, just to give you an idea of how many bills get filed. So 2022, overall, there were 2,800 bills. 2023, there were slightly lower because it was a short session, so 2,200. I believe in 24, we had somewhere around 3,000 bills, and so we can probably expect something similar for 2025. So the legislative process, this may appear confusing, but I'll just say, if anybody did cotillion or went to finishing school or had, formal training in manners like some of us did, just work from the outside in. You're working on the House or Senate policy side. Fiscal rules go to the floor, and then it goes to the governor for a sign or a veto. In between each of those green boxes is a formal cutoff date where bills cannot be heard after that date in that particular process. So it's really a race against cutoff. The first one is in mid to late February, and everything's going to be a big scramble up until that point. So there is a development timeline. You've already gone through a fair amount of this with respect to approving the proposed request legislation and decision package from the Medical Commission itself. This is just giving you an overview of where we're at. So we've sent all of our stuff off to OFM. We have not received clearance for any of our request legislation yet, but our decision package did go forward. As Kyle sent in an email last night, it was partially funded. That does not preclude us from pursuing full funding in the House and Senate budget. It's just ideally, if you're fully included in the governor's budget, it makes it easier. However, due to the financial situation of the state and what the legislature has to find, there was a decision at the governor's level in OFM to restrict or not refuse to authorize funding for all non-discretionary pieces in health and human services, so that it's not a reflection necessarily on what we asked for. It was a blanket decision statewide to treat everybody the same in that way, regardless of fund source, which is why we are permitted as the Medical Commission to pursue including this funding in the House and Senate budget for eventual inclusion in the final budget. And just as far as the timeline, there's a little bit difference here. As the first week of session, there's already a Ways and Means and Appropriations meeting scheduled to review the operations, the supplemental operations budget, and then the larger full biennium operations budget. So that's moving quite quickly, and that's a good thing considering all that they have to deal with this year. So we work in our legislative program. We've got several principles. So the first is you're looking at the authorizing environment. So that's the Uniform Disciplinary Act, the Medical Practice Act. And just for those keeping track, we now have 5 practice acts effectively. The physician one, 1871A, which is the physician assistant, 1871B, which is the medical compact, C, which is the physician assistant compact, and D, which is certified anesthesiologist assistants. So those are the authorizing environments that we have. The second tier is the rules, interpretive statements, bylaws, policies, guidelines that you create. And then finally, looking at administrative level things, at the functionality of the organization, staff mandates from the unions, and whatever our budgetary needs are. You do have a legislative subcommittee. I will point out that I looked at that before this meeting. We do need to have some reappointments on there. There's some typically the chair is the chair of the legislative subcommittee, and so our chair that's on there, it goes back a couple of years, so we need to get some volunteers, which I will ask for at the end of this presentation. And I mentioned the clinical specialist consult. So I would say the most common person we call upon at this point, just due to the bills that are being introduced, Dr. Curry, Dr. Brown, Dr. Baral, for ophthalmology issues. That was a big one last year and may end up being another one this year. And so, and as it says, the overall patient safety is our priority when we're considering these bills and whether we can implement the bills themselves. We try very hard to stay away from any political ideology. I make sure that my staff and anyone we meet with understand that the Medical Commission is politically agnostic and patient safety is the primary focus here. So what are your responsibilities? So there's a blanket ban on lobbying, but I will go ahead and say that it's a bit of a gray area. What is lobbying, what is not? And so some people who work in different agencies view education as lobbying. That doesn't appear to be how the statute is written for you. So the first bit, which I'm not going to read, it applies to everyone who is part of a state agency, whether they're staff. You're considered state officials, and so that applies to everyone. When the Medical Commission became its independent regulatory authority in 2013, additional language was added, and so that is what is quoted below, where you have specific authority in addition to the generalized authority that is given to state employees and state officials. So that basically means, as a translation, you have selected a staff-led model, delegated that authority, and then we come back and we ask for your guidance and feedback when things are not clear when it comes to you have a statement or a policy or a rule or something like that. So again, we have more flexibility than most. It's important that we respect that. And what I mean by that is while, yes, you are the medical commission, when we take ourselves into consideration to large institutions, major associations like the Medical Association, the Hospital Association, we still have to recognize that we're kind of a little fish in a big pond. We don't have a political action committee. We don't make any donations or anything like that. And so our influence is finite. And so we have to be respectful of that. So I do want to highlight that just because you have educational authority in the statute doesn't necessarily mean that you are able to talk to a legislator. Your bylaws make it very clear that any interaction with legislator or media needs to be cleared through the chair. And so, but the other piece of this is there is a state ethical consideration with the Executive Ethics Board, which is what oversees us and you and your actions. So basically, you cannot go and lobby in your capacity as a commissioner. This looks different depending on the situation. I've had scenarios where, calling back to a former commissioner, where Dr. Small informed me that his neighbor, now insurance commissioner-elect Cooterer, where they were talking over rose bushes, and she invited him to go testify at a hearing. Nothing wrong with that he did it in his individual capacity. The only trick was he introduced himself as a commissioner first, and the hearing staff made it seem like he was testifying in that capacity. Again, no harm, no foul. It's just something that happens. I've also been in situations where the chair of the commission was talking to a elected official, said their piece about the medical commission, and then very clearly removed their medical commission credentials and say, I would like to now talk to you as an individual, as an individual physician. That's kind of gray area. I got a little heartburn about that, but they very clearly declared what they were talking about and what capacity they were in. So just remember, when you're doing that, make sure you know what your capacity is that you're talking. There's not a prohibition on it. But if it is in the medical commission capacity, you do need to be very careful and let us know what's happening. Again, the bylaws make it clear that we have to run any commissioner action through the chair when speaking. And again, lobbyist is a gray area. Here's my phone number. It's a mobile number. If you get contacted by a legislator or legislative office or legislative staff, please make me your first contact. I will answer texts at nearly all hours of the night, mostly because I'm up all hours of the night because of kids, so feel free to text me if you get that. And the reason I make a big deal about this is there's an old lobbyist who I used to work with who told me a saying that always threw me off, but it makes perfect sense when you think about it. It's if you see a turtle on a fence post, someone put it there. And so how that applies to what this is, if you get contacted by a legislator's office and they're asking you a specific question, there's a reason they're asking. And more likely than not, myself and the legislative team know what they're trying to do and trying to get the answer to, or we know that they may maybe trying to make an end run around a certain policy position. And so the coordination and communication internally is what's essential, so we can present, one, a united front, and two, accurate information. And again, if you get contacted, we are very happy to unleash our team to help you craft a presentation, a response, a letter, whatever's being requested. We've got over a decade of experience doing this, and we've got an incredibly capable team that we are building capacity on as we speak. So the opportunities to contribute. This is where I'm hopeful that we'll get some volunteers. We have a ad hoc legislative committee. There's not a specific time requirement here, but it really comes into play when a bill gets introduced that we have no basis to make a position decision on based off of your Medical Practice Act, your rules, your interpretive statements, bylaws. If there's no guidance at all, that's when we activate that legislative subcommittee. Again, the specialty consults, that comes into play when we get into a lot of detail. Dr. Baral has been great on that because I can probably pronounce some of the ophthalmology bill words. I have no idea what they mean, and that's where you all come in and help us understand what the implications are. And again, if there's local legislator meetings or testimony during the interim or during session, we rarely call upon you all to testify on bills. It's a bit of a Wild West scenario there. If we put you in front of the hearing panel, it's who knows what they're going to ask you, and it's just a lot easier if we know if we can put you in a controlled environment like a one-on-one meeting with the legislator. So that's the presentation. If anybody has any clarification questions, I'm happy to answer those. Or if you'd like to volunteer, I'm happy to take you as a volunteer to add you to the legislative subcommittee.
Mike, it's Chris Blake. I'm happy to participate in any way I can. I
Thank
was on
you.
that meeting that went for a while that they now stopped. So
yeah,
happy to support in any way I can.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Christine. Any other volunteers or any questions for Micah?
Yeah, Micah,
Yeah,
this is
Tarlin, and I'm happy to volunteer too.
Thank you.
this is Claire. I'm available as much as I can be.
All right. And I thought I saw Mr. Rogers raise his hand.
Yeah, I'm available too. Limited time, but lots of interest.
Most of our inquiries will be via email typically. So that's how we try and react. And again, it's a rapid response issue. We usually have a 24-hour turnaround. Hopefully that's generous. Dr. Jager.
Oh, I was just going to say I'm, as you know, shall we say remote most of the time, but I'm happy to participate, particularly if it pertains to my clinical population.
Not a problem. I will add you all to the list and ask for folks to be added. And Dr. D'Souza, I see you with your hand raised.
Oh yeah, I was curious. You had referenced that there are some upcoming changes to the corporate practice of medicine. Could you talk about that some more?
I don't know if there's changes. There's a bill that's been introduced, being championed by Senator Robinson. It's being termed as a conversation starter, and it's definitely starting conversations. So we've been participating in giving feedback. That's something that happens a lot during the interim, and we are approached fairly routinely. Kyle has mostly been giving the feedback on that one along with Mike Farrell, because the corporate practice of medicine case law is kind of, I think to use Kyle's term, arcane. And so that's really, it's not a lot of people know the ins and outs, but Kyle and Mike between themselves do. So we have been providing that. I'm not sure I would say that it's entirely possible it passes. Anytime that you touch money in healthcare in an official capacity, you get a lot of people coming out of the woodwork.
Any other questions for Micah?
Hey, this is Dr. Chang. Just to let you know that I'll be happy to participate in any capacity. I'll be retiring from medicine in March, so certainly after March, I'll be have ample time to do to help you out.
Thank you and congratulations.
And Micah, I'll just say that was an excellent presentation. It really clarified the process that you go through every legislation session. So thank you for that.
No problem. Thank you.
And I'm always available for a specialist consult, as you know.
Thank you.
All right, I see no further hands up. Micah, thank you for an excellent presentation. So on to new business. Micah, this is you also, the Practitioner Support Program report.
So I do want to direct your attention to that report and thank Jimmy and Sarah for putting it together. For history, for those who are unaware, the Practitioner Support Program started off as an attempt to create something formal in rules. And after many years of going back and forth and not being able to land on anything, we decided to create an administrative program that, as you may be aware, results in a unique type of closure for either cases that are received before investigation or cases closed after investigation. After investigation, it's sort of similar to a unique closure, but it's essentially alerting the practitioner that they had a complaint and we didn't want to take disciplinary action, but we are providing some customized voluntary CME opportunities that they could take to maybe remediate that area of their practice. So that was started about 2 years ago, and we wanted to collect enough data to find out how things have been going. Have we? Because the original goal, and I think still is to reduce repeat complaints of a similar nature, and just use education and introduce more human-centered design into the process. So you've got that report there. I'm not going to go through it. It's certainly for your reading. If you have any questions, obviously Dr. Fino is the one that is running this program with her staff. And so any questions on the process currently, certainly direct them to her. Anything on the data, I would volunteer Jimmy at this point to answer any questions if anybody has data questions.
Any questions from the group? Either Jimmy or Micah, was there a conclusion that the practitioner support program is helpful?
The conclusion from this report is basically that the PSP is still in its infancy, and we can't really draw a lot of conclusions in that way because the N is small, and we haven't really had enough time to see if these folks are taking advantage of the resources presented to them, if it's having a long-term impact on their practice. So no, because of the youthfulness of this program, there are no conclusions that I'm ready to provide to you.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Dr. Curry.
Jimmy, I had a question. For the few people that had a complaint that was similar to their prior complaint that was closed to the PSP, is there an opportunity? I don't know if there is, but to ask them if they actually took advantage of the original recommendation in the PSP to do whatever CME or whatever was recommended, and just to find out like if they just blew it off and then they had the same complaint, that type of thing. I don't know if there's that possibility.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely we have the ability to expand this program such that the resources we're giving, we could have a more robust follow-up process where we ask them, hey, submit those CME certificates to us. You know, instead of having Dr. Fino and her staff reach out to them, we could just remind them that, you know, this counts as CME. If you'd like to submit that to us, we can take it under advisement in future conversations. But at this point, the intake staff and at CMT, that's really when you are making the discussion, oh, this person has had a PSP complaint. So to reach out to them at the time of CMT, I don't think would be, you know, you'd have to put that case on hold and then see it again, a week or two later when you hear back from them. I'll leave the lawyers to say if it's actually legal to reach out to them and ask if you did that. But currently we're not collecting that information for follow-up.
Right. I thought it might be difficult.
Right.
But interesting if we could get it.
Heather Carter and then Dr. Trescott.
Yeah, just in response to that question of following up. So the PSP, we kind of tread a fine line to make sure that we aren't actually recommending anything or violating any due process rights and having it sort of become disciplinary when it shouldn't be. It should just be educational. So the follow-up issue, you could follow up if they got a subsequent complaint that you opened and ask about it, but just following up in general, I think gets you one step closer to making it a recommendation that they don't have due process for. So I would caution having any regular follow-ups.
Thank you, Heather. Dr. Trescott?
Yes, I'd just like to say that as I looked at this, I think the numbers are a little skewed as far as repeat offenders go, because often in CMT it comes up, well, we already sent a PSP and we go in a different direction. We don't repeat the PSP as easily, I think, if they've already had one. And so I think that we could tune that up a little better if we want real data on how successful we are. The other thing is, first of all, it's been really helpful to have some input on things that we can change or courses we can change as part of the discussion. And I think staying up with Gina on what's available and some of the creativity that can come out of the CMT is helpful. So I think that we should consider in our letter saying we are interested in feedback, and we would like you to let us know if you have attended the CME or something, or please send your CME results to us. I think we could have a friendly way of asking for their input. That would be at least a first step in getting more feedback.
Dr. Jager?
Along the lines of, and would definitely defer to legal on this, but would it be possible to, when we submit information to a respondent through PSP, our letter with recommendations, could we also give them something like a very rudimentary survey? Sort of a like, is this information helpful? Do you plan to follow up on any of the recommendations? Like, knowing that people are more likely than not to delete the survey and or not return it. And that those that do might be lying to us, right? Like, there's all sorts of problems potentially with survey collected data, but it does give us some information that we can interpret, knowing that. Just as a thought, that we could give them at the same time, so it's not a reach back out, and it's not something that somebody might feel required to answer at a later time and worry about, so to speak.
So Dr. Jager, I don't know if you guys can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you, Rick.
I don't have any heartburn with like a voluntary questionnaire. Maybe it could be a little postcard where they check boxes, but I would defer to Heather on this.
Heather, do you want to respond?
Yeah, so we just need to be very careful. This program is, if you want to have some sort of required feedback or required response, then I think you need to do that through a rule. Chiropractic has something in rule that's a little more robust. This program should just be providing resources, letting them know that there's things available for them to take advantage of. It should be completely voluntary. I am concerned about having them send in a CME certificate or anything like that. That to me looks like you are asking them to do something, provide proof of doing something that could look more and more like discipline, or at least some sort of voluntary discipline. So maybe a questionnaire, yeah, Rick, just saying, did you find this information helpful, that sort of thing. But having them send in a CME certificate, I think, is problematic.
Dr. Curry?
I had a quick follow-up for Heather. Could we say in the letter to them, where this is a voluntary, CME for you, but if you, do have a future complaint, having taken the CME may be considered in our evaluation of any future complaints, or some language to that effect?
No,
Because
I don't think so.
we
I
can't.
think that's,
Okay.
the problem is anything you say in this letter is a public record. And so anyone can get a copy of it. And if you say something that implies that there was some substandard care, there was you found concerns, all of those things, that physician does not have a chance to counter those. And by them being a public record, because Washington has very open public records laws, which is different from a lot of states, there becomes some due process concerns. So, you know, we are unique in a lot of states don't have the robust Public Records Act that we do. But because of that, we have to be very, very careful on what we send out as an official communication.
Got it. Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah.
Ms. Blake?
Could you put something simple in there, like we welcome your feedback? Just, that's it. Without, you know, any kind of, I mean, we did this because we're not opening a case. We decided we don't want to open it, but we would like Dr. X to know that we kind of thought about this, and here you go. This is for you to do with what you want. And hopefully we won't see another complaint. Not that we're putting that in the letter. I'm saying that for us. Hopefully we won't see you back again, and that you might take this and do something with it, or you might tear this letter up, shred it, and hope you never hear from us again. So it's just something.
A general statement of we welcome any feedback, or, you know, please let us know if you found this information helpful is fine.
Yeah.
Very sort of not requiring anything.
Yeah, nobody likes to see letterhead from the medical commission
Right.
for whatever reason they're getting it. So that was that's all.
Yeah.
That was my input. Thanks.
Dr. Chung?
Yeah, just a quick question for Heather. When you said that this is a public record, which part of it is actually public record? The fact that it was closed, or the fact that it was closed with under PSP? Because my understanding was that closure is the same regardless of how we close it, and that's the part that's public.
All of it. I mean, the fact that it's closed, the PSP letter, all of those things are public records.
Okay.
And Dr. Chung, if I can just emphasize for a moment, the letter that goes out is available to any member of the public that wants to see it. And in addition to the due process considerations that Heather's talking about, those letters also are not all the time, but they are requested by complainants. They are requested by insurance companies, et cetera. And that's one of the reasons that we keep the text of that letter as neutral and is kind of, you know, we are offering this resource. This is not a finding of any sort as possible.
So to that, and then regardless if it's PSP or general closure or unique closure, any of those three options, those are all open to the public, right? Okay.
Yes.
What about, does it make a difference if it was closed at CMT versus closed during disposition? Because I think the communication is different, right?
The text of the letter is different. I'm not going to say it's greatly different.
Well, there's no
but
communication. There's no letter to the respondent in a CMT case closure.
I'm sorry, Dr. Chung?
But CMT closure doesn't generate a letter to the respondent.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're alerted after the fact.
Oh, so they didn't realize that something was happening, and they get a letter after the fact. I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
I thought there was only a letter to the complainant, not to the respondent.
No, Dr. Chan, the law says we have to notify the respondent at the earliest possible point. A few years back, we made the decision to not notify anyone until, number one, a complaint was authorized or closed, and if it was authorized, not notify them until the investigator was assigned. That was just looking at the process piece where people would get this letter, you've had a complaint, they would call up and try and get information. We can't tell you anything, we don't have an investigator assigned, that whole thing. And so once the investigator was assigned, they had an idea of what the complaint would be about, and they could answer some questions that the respondent may have.
Okay, so my question was, even if we don't investigate a complaint, that still goes to the respond.
That's correct. That's correct. We are required to notify them of a complaint regardless of outcome.
I see no further questions. Micah, did you have more to the presentation on the PSP program?
No, I'll pass it over to Jimmy for her presentation.
Okay, Jimmy Bush, you're going to present the research unit proposal.
Correct. I am here to just kind of basically walk you through this idea. The research unit has come about from one, it being part of our strategic plan to stand up a more formal and robust research arm of the commission. Currently, we write papers and create posters that focus more on the regulation of the profession. And part of the strategic plan is to move past just the regulation mechanics of what we do and actually provide information and expertise to clinicians themselves. So to do that, I need more of a clinical component to this research unit. So what I'm proposing here and asking for your comments and approval to move forward is the unit where this is going to be more focused around your ability and interest to participate. So if I'm doing a paper on, complaints by clinical specialty, that might be too broad, or we could have 12 members on the research review committee. So this is not going to be a standing work group or committee that has set members and meets at set times. If someone in the commission or a commissioner has an idea for a research proposal, they'll bring it to me. I'll help them craft it into basically an abstract, like you'd submit to any journal. And then we'll bring it to the commission meeting and say, this is a unit of an area of research that we're going to focus on. Do you have comments, questions, or edits to kind of the scope and direction of this paper? And who wants to be on the committee to help review it and provide clinical expertise? So that's really what I'm asking for in terms of your participation. I didn't want it to be another committee that you had to find time in your schedule for. If you have an interest in reviewing and contributing to any of this research, we'll bring it to the commission business meeting. You'll volunteer. I'll also send out an email to everyone afterwards if you were unable to attend the meeting. But I'll bring the idea to the business meeting. You can volunteer, and then we can set up a schedule based on who's participating for review and comments. So after that initial period is done and we have the paper, it's going to be very much, we'll send you an email and we'll set up a meeting for final edits and revisions and comments. We want to extend this arm of the WMC to have more meaningful and thoughtful research for our licensees. And so this is my ask, or if you have a better idea on how I can get your expertise into this research unit without clogging your schedule with more meetings, I'm happy to discuss this.
Well, I think a number of commissioners have asked for research. So I think this is a very exciting startup. Questions or comments from the commissioners? Is this something that you would like to support?
Scott Rogers, I think it's a great idea.
Mr. Lopez?
Yes, I applaud the opportunity to work on projects. I think it takes us to a more forward level of what it is we do on the commission. And so I congratulate you for the effort, and I'm very happy to participate any way I can.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is I think this is a really great idea. So thank you, Jimmy.
So Jimmy, you're asking for a motion and a vote to formally support this. Is that right?
Yes, please.
Can we have a motion to support the research unit proposal?
Move to
So move.
establish.
And a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye or raise your hands.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Jimmy. So on to old business. The committee work group reports, written reports are on pages 31 and 32. Are there any additional reports?
Dr. Murphy, if I could just highlight the newest work group that we've started with regard to psychedelic medications and behavioral health. I just want to call your attention to that. We've been seeing a number of cases that have floated through specific really to ketamine and ketamine therapy. We don't really have expertise on the commission side in that regard. And so I talked with Dr. Domino and said, I'd like to set up a work group so we can start at least getting to a point where we have resources that we can provide to commission members that are overseeing individual cases. But also, I do think that we've already seen 2 bills that have dropped in this regard. I don't know how far either one will proceed. I'm sure many of you are familiar with ibogaine, but there is a bill that's been floated with regard to ibogaine. We just don't really feel on the staff side that we have the expertise to be able to participate in conversations about the clinical efficacy of a lot of these treatments. And so we've chartered a group with that in mind. Specific to ketamine, as I mentioned, we've seen a number of cases come through where we've had to find third-party experts to assist us. And so this is an effort to kind of get us up to speed in an area that I think not only are we in the medical commission seeing, but we're also seeing in other areas of professional regulation with regard to our colleagues on the osteo board, our colleagues on the nursing board, and certainly our colleagues with the pharmacy commission. So I just want to highlight that to you. I wasn't successful in finding another person in addition to Dr. Domino to serve. If there are other commission members who are interested in participating, I'd certainly welcome that. We can revise the charter and add you. Right now, it is just Dr. Domino and staff. So again, calling that to your attention. This is also an instance where we've appointed Dr. Bundy from WPHP to assist us in some of this, partly because, again, we're seeing an intersection with WPHP's work and our more traditional disciplinary work with regard to ketamine. Dr. Bundy has several colleagues in the field who have so far been very willing to step in and talk to us and kind of, again, try and get us further along into an area where we feel like we have some expertise. So unless there's any questions, that's all I wanted to highlight for you all.
Okay, any questions for Kyle regarding this new work group or any volunteers to add to the list of members? I'm sure Dr. Domino would enjoy the assistance. Okay, you can always email her later if you find this is something that you want to volunteer for.
Thank you.
So any other Additional reports? Hearing none, we'll move on to the rulemaking activities. Amelia.
Thank you, Dr. Murphy. So this morning we have 4 rulemaking efforts to address. The first one is to initiate rulemaking for the physicians chapter, which is chapter 246-919 WAC. We will only be opening the sections you see in the agenda as part of that rulemaking. We are required to review our chapters every 5 years, and staff did a review of this chapter last summer, and there are a number of places that we need to update. We will not be opening the opioid prescribing rules as part of this rulemaking. We're just opening the ones that you see here. And so my ask today is that we open a 101, initiate a 101, which is the first step in the rulemaking process to modernize the language and then align with current standards.
Any questions for Amelia regarding that ask? Can we have a motion to open that rulemaking for a 101?
Yeah, motion to open for 101.
Thank you, Dr. Curry. Do we hear a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed? Seeing none, motion carries.
Thank you. And then the next one is regarding a petition we received earlier last year, it was in the spring, from Maria Higginbotham regarding the opioid prescribing. We had our rules hearing for the opioid prescribing rules at the October meeting, and I erred and did not include the piece of her petition that you all approved to be considered as part of that rulemaking. And so the ask here today is to include that one piece that was missed in her petition in the next rulemaking effort for opioid prescribing, which we will be opening probably around, I'm hoping to have the 101 filed around April. We have to wait until our current opioid prescribing rulemaking is done before we do that. So that's our ask here today, is to include that suggested language regarding tapering as part of that rulemaking effort.
Okay, any
So moved.
questions? Thank you. A second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
And I assume,
then-
Amelia, you'll notify Ms. Higginbotham of that.
I will.
Yes, thank you.
She'll be sent a revised letter. And then the next one is a rulemaking petition that we received from Dr. Alexander Witkowski. And you can see that petition on pages 43 through 46. And then just a note that's in the agenda, since you approved 7.2.1, which was the rulemaking for the physicians chapter, the WACs that they are requesting changes to will be included in that rulemaking already. So you've essentially already approved this petition, but I do need you to vote to approve it.
Okay. Micah, did you have a question?
Just some background. So I've been engaged in conversations along with Marissa Courtney with this position for a number of years, and so I had a conversation with his legal counsel yesterday. And just to clarify, you may choose to deny this petition, or you can choose to approve it. And I am going to ask to lean on Heather's guidance here a little bit. Some of the things that have been asked to address in this petition are changes to statute, which are not permissible to do. So those pieces you would not be able to amend or change. But given the fact that you've already authorized the broad chapter revisions, I think that you could safely deny this under that provision or premise and say that it's already been taken care of, and encourage Dr. Witkowski to engage in the formal rulemaking process to provide feedback.
Heather, did you want to weigh in on this?
Yeah, I mean, so Mike is correct that there are some requests in here that are changes to statute, which obviously you don't have authority to do. So I think that that should be indicated in the letter, that those changes are outside the authority and he can contact his legislator to propose changes to statute. And then you can say that, and we have opened the rules, and then encourage him to participate in the rulemaking and sign up for the listserv. So I think you can deny and then give reasons for the denial. Or you could sort of deny in part, approve in part, because you are going to be denying the statutory revisions, just and give that reason why. So it's up to you how you want to frame it. It's difficult because it's hard to parse out in his request what is a change to a statute and what is a change to a rule. So I think if you would like to deny and then say, but here's why, and we have opened the rules, so please participate.
So it sounds like your legal advice would be to deny the request, as it's already been approved in the part that we can change. And this way it would clarify that we're not attempting to change things that we can't.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Dr. Trescott and then Miss Blake.
This might take care of it. My question was about, one of the proposals in there was that we would give a test to the applicant. And I don't think we have that capability.
Dr.
Pre-licensing.
Trescott,
Yeah.
there's two things to consider. Number one, you already have the U.S. medical licensing exam, steps 1 through 3, and steps 1 and 2 are administered as part of the ECFMG process. We have gotten, and I think I briefed the commission last year, we engaged with the FSMB and the special purposes examination, or specs. We have been given authority on a case-by-case basis to administer that to IMGs who have hardship. And so that definition is in a bill that's before the legislature that essentially says if you're coming from a persecuted country or a war-torn country, that kind of thing, where you can't get your documents and you can't go through ECFMG and complete those tests, then we could use on a case-by-case basis the specs exam to validate. And just for clarification, the specs exam uses USMLE step 3 live questions. So it is what I would call equivalent.
Well, it seems like in this proposal, it's us administering a test, and I don't know that we have the capabilities to administer the test. Wouldn't it be better to say we will pursue this test as given by spec or whatever?
There's a bit of nuance. And so technically, when someone goes and takes the USMLE or wants to retake it, we have delegated that authority to the USMLE folks, and that's why you have various standards with respect to how many times you can take the test and how many years you have to pass all 3 steps. And so in that sense, the nuance is we have delegated the administration of the test to another organization who we recognize. So in this case, obviously, we would not take on the expense of developing and administering a test, but we do have those 2 options that I mentioned to allow for that language.
Okay, I think that this is stuff that can happen in the rules making.
Correct.
That the language could be cleaned up a little bit.
Miss Blake.
When I read this packet and I saw the letter, so they're asking, I'm just kind of confused a little bit, the project related to relates to directing to increase skin cancer triage access to underserved tribal reservation communities in Washington state outside of an academic setting. And that's their reason for asking for these amendments. I mean, I'm confused with the letter, and then that we hope in light of this rural health opportunity that can make a lasting impact in the lives of the tribal communities nationally.
Right. So that would be what I'd say is probably a justification for why we should consider. But to my mind, what is being asked and really what you need to consider is the petition to amend certain rules or change certain rules. And as far as how they want to apply it, I'm not sure it's kosher or appropriate to consider that, because we're not to create rulemaking or do statutory changes for one individual. It needs to be something that's based and accessible to anybody who's qualified, right? So really the only thing I'm looking at is the request language for the rules, which again, you've authorized the broad chapter, so you've covered what this requests.
It was just curious to me about how that tied in with regard to their desire to be able to manage that. Anyway, I was trying to figure out how to put the two together, but thanks, Micah.
No problem.
Christine,
go ahead.
Christine, I had a similar issue with this, and and as someone on the licensing committee, it seems like this individual would be allowed to license in our state under the way we currently manage it. So I don't see where there's a barrier to this individual being able to do this project in our state.
Well, they do discuss why, and I would like to avoid discussing this individual's specific qualifications. That's just not something that we need to be getting into as far as the discussion is concerned. Just, that's a panel L behind closed doors discussion. But I thought I saw Kyle, but perhaps
Kyle.
I was just going to say, I know it's difficult for commission members when we have a specific proposal that's being brought forth by an individual on behalf of himself and his spouse. But the larger issue with regard to the rules petition is what Dr. Trescott is talking about, which is these sorts of changes. You've already authorized opening the entire chapter. These sorts of changes or nuanced or recommendations can already be dealt with in that venue. And I think Heather's advice here is sound. We don't do rulemaking for individuals, right? The rules that you're creating are supposed to be broad application to everybody. And Micah's, I think, cautionary note is with regard to these two individuals, if they apply, and to the best of my knowledge, they have not. If they were to apply, that would be routed through panel L if it was an exception application, or they would be granted a license. But I think, again, the advice is open the entire rule. You've already done that. I would probably recommend denying this rules petition here for the reasons everybody's talked about. We've already got it open. We can deal with the concerns for everybody on behalf of everybody during the rulemaking process.
And I agree with that with you, Kyle. It was just curious to me when I read the letter. And right, panel L would handle the other piece, as I'm aware, since I sit on that panel. But anyhow, thank you. It was just curious about that.
So I think we've had lively Dr. Curry.
I was just going to make a motion, if that's okay.
Please. Yes.
To deny the request, but give the reasons as discussed, because we don't have authority to change statute on some of it, and we've already agreed to open and for rulemaking on the other part of it. I think I'm not sure I understood that completely, but I think that's what we said. Yeah.
Nope, you got it perfectly. Thank you.
Okay.
Excellent.
So it's been moved to deny, and the reasons have been thoroughly discussed and will be included. Do we have a second?
Second.
Multiple seconds. All in favor, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Amelia.
Yes, thank you. So the final rulemaking request is to initiate the next step in the rulemaking process for the anesthesiologist assistance chapter. The CR 101 was filed in August. We have held 4 workshops. The fee section, which is governed by the Secretary's office, is rolling as well. And so what we're asking here today is to approve it for that proposed rulemaking. And then we have a hearing tentatively scheduled for May 9th. And at that hearing, you will be approving or denying the language that is in the packet. So today you are approving the language that's in the packet to move forward to proposed rulemaking.
Okay, for the anesthesia assistance.
Mm-hmm.
Any questions for Amelia? Hearing none, can we have a motion to approve the next step in the rulemaking process for anesthesia assistance?
I move that we go forward.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Amelia.
Thank you.
On to list and labels. Heather?
Yeah, so I know you guys haven't had one of these requests in quite a while, and I think there's some new members, so I'm going to take just a couple minutes to explain what this is and what the process is. So we call it a list and label request because we actually used to send physically address labels out to people. We don't do that anymore, but the name is sort of held over. So when the commission gets a request for a list of licensees, names, and addresses, under the Public Records Act, those requests can only be fulfilled if you determine that the requester is either a professional association or an educational organization. So there's no technical definitions, but there are definitions you've historically used and that are on the application. So a professional association is a group of individuals or entities organized to represent the interests of a profession, develop criteria or standards for competent practice, or advance causes seen as important to members that will improve quality of care. The educational organization definition you've used is an accredited or approved entity or institution, which either prepares professionals for initial licensure or provides continuing education for healthcare professionals. So if you approve a entity, they get basically a 5-year approval, so they can come back and you don't have to do it every 5 years, and they can get lists for that time period. If you deny them, then they are entitled to a brief adjudicated proceeding, which is sort of a paper appeal on paper. So they are allowed to appeal that decision. And sometimes there might be requests where you go back and ask for more information as well. So the first application you have is from the American Academy of Manipulative Therapy. They are asking for a list of PAs. They are asserting that they are an educational association because they provide continuing education courses. So based on the materials that you've received, on this one, I would recommend approval as an educational association.
Micah, did you have a question or comment?
A question for Heather. So Heather, they're doing dry needling and spinal manipulation training, which would legally be outside of the scope of PAs and MDs. Does that come into consideration when we're talking about approving an educational organization?
It's possible, but I would say that in this scenario, they're just asking for PAs, and it could be outside scope of an MD, but there are PAs that are serving under a DO that you regulate who could do some of the manipulation possibly. So that may be a little gray area for this one.
So Heather, you still recommend that we approve this?
I still do. They do appear to meet the definition of an educational organization. You aren't approving the purpose, you're approving the entity, and they do provide continuing education for healthcare providers.
Dr. Chung?
Yeah, thank you. Just real quick question. How are we defining continuing education? Because there's approved continuing education and then there's, you know, whatever they decide to call continuing education. Is there a definition for that?
There's not a strict definition, but the one you have consistently used does say accredited or approved.
And do we know if this organization actually does that, or have we checked on that?
It appears they may be approved, at least in the materials, through Utah. I don't know what that carries with Washington as far as whether or not it would count towards their CME. But if you wanted to ask for more information on that, you could.
Dr. Trescott?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that just because they do an education on manipulation doesn't mean you're going to do it. As a primary care provider, I've been to educational things where we're taught who would be appropriate to refer and how can they be utilized. So there's a broader education that can occur that isn't related to them becoming manipulators of spines.
Thank you, Claire. I'd like to hear from one of the PAs and their thoughts on this. Mr. Lopez or Ms. Doro?
I can tell you that I don't know one PA that does any spinal manipulation or has been associated with it, and a practice in spinal manipulation. However, I do know that there are some PAs who are in the osteopathic world who may or may not do spinal manipulation. But in my world, after 4+ decades coast to coast, I've yet to meet any PAs who are doing spinal manipulation or may have an interest for that matter.
Dr. Curry?
I have just a quick question. Is it at all misleading if we give them the list of all of our PAs, the majority of which work with MDs and not DOs, I think? Does it mislead the PAs if they receive the continuing medical education from this company, thinking that it is in their scope, even if they are working with an MD and not a DO? I have a feeling that's a stupid question, and Ed, you probably would be the one to answer this best, but obviously PAs know what's in their scope, but I just want to make sure we're not kind of misleading anybody.
Good point, Dr. Curry. Mr. Lopez, do you have a thought on that? You're muted. You're muted.
You're muted, Ed.
Thank you. It's very clear in my travels and in speaking with PAs that over the years that they're very clear on what their Practice Act states regarding in this state regarding the practice of medicine, which does not include spinal manipulation. And it is unclear to me why this organization would want to contact PAs, since I don't know of any practice or PAs that have any interest and or would require in their practice, or it is unclear to them that they have that option. It's not something that is ever discussed or brought up or considered. I do know some chiropractors who are considering hiring PAs. And they would like to figure out a way to incorporate them in their practice. But I know some PAs who have considered it, but none of which have taken the leap.
Dr. Chung?
Yeah, thank you. I guess from what I'm understanding what Heather is saying, we're not approving whether or not this is a legitimate practice. We're approving whether or not they meet the criteria for us to share the information. And so my concern, again, I mentioned this earlier, that do they really meet that criteria based on their CME offering? And I think I'd like to get more information on that.
So this is Heather. If you'd like to send back and say, can you tell us who accredits you or who approves your entity? It could be they have some certification from, I don't know what sort of group it may be, but it appears they have something from Utah, but maybe they can tell you which states they're approved in or what credentialing or accrediting entity they're approved by.
This is Claire. I wonder if we could ask for a sample of what they're sending out, just to understand what they're targeting. If it's to teach people how to manipulate, that may or may not be something we want to send out to everyone. But if it's just talking about what manipulation can do, we may. It would be helpful to see what they send out.
I looked at their website because I didn't understand this company or this request, and they offer 1 and 2 day workshops, and they give you continuing education units and they teach you how to do these things. So it's very hands-on. It sounded like, it's like $600 for a couple days or whatever. Yeah.
In that case, and I just looked at what came up with the dry needling and stuff. That isn't necessarily something we want to go out to all the PAs.
So it seems like we have an opportunity to either approve, ask for more information, or deny. Heather, do you have any final recommendation?
Heather, before you answer, could I ask a really quick question about this?
Sure.
Does this organization have any financial interest in teaching these things and having practitioners get into this business?
So that I don't know. I will say, so the exemption or the Public Records Act says people can get lists of the professionals' licenses, and this is for all healthcare professions as well as sort of professional engineers and all of that, for commercial purposes, if they are a professional association or an educational organization. So that's really what you're looking at. I think based on your conversation here, my recommendation would be either to ask for more information about their accreditation or approval, who accepts them, and if they're accredited by a group. Or I do believe they're providing CME. So I would think that it appears that they meet your definition of educational organization.
And we know for sure that the CME is applicable to the PAs or physicians, I guess.
So they're asking for PAs only, it appears. Well, a bunch of other, including dentists and nurse practitioners, but yeah, based on what they have here.
Well, I got to say, what I'm seeing here is not something we would want sent out to all the PAs for the reasons that Diane brought up. This is actually getting people certified in doing these procedures, which is not part of their licensure.
But Claire, I think it is for DOs. So if you do have a PA working under a DO, then it is legitimate. I was just thinking there's not that many of those. So I think it sounds like this does meet the definition but I think we have a lot of reservations. So I want to make a motion that we deny for now and request more information about their offerings and how their accreditation or how they get their CMEs or CEUs, what organization accredits them, because they hold their workshops all over the country. When I looked at the website, it's everywhere, lots of states.
And so I would say if you're asking for more information, you don't need to deny. You can just leave this.
Okay.
Have Amelia
Just leave
ask
it
for more information. She can bring it back once they respond.
Okay, thank you.
That sounds like
Jimmy?
a great idea.
Yeah.
What are the questions you want Amelia to ask for next time? What do
I'm
you,
sorry,
what do you want?
what,
What is it that you'd like to know from them so Amelia can bring back the information that you're looking for?
I think first of all, oh, sorry, go ahead,
Ben.
Claire.
No,
I was
you've
just
been
gonna
to a
say,
website. You know.
well, I think their main accreditation, is it Missouri, or there is some state where their offices are located, but generally there's an affiliation with some organization that kind of certifies or credits the CMEs or CEUs that are being offered. So I think clarifying that, and then kind of getting in a little bit into the weeds of clarifying they're asking for the list of all of our PAs, our hundreds of PAs, of which 20 are working with DOs or something like that, or 50, I don't know, not very many compared to the bulk of the PAs in the state, and sort of how they see their offerings as being appropriate for the majority of our PAs, or is that a concern, or just what they would have to say about it.
Yeah, and it seems like it would be more appropriate for this to go to DOs for approval rather than us, and go out to their PAs. But I agree with what you're saying, Dan.
Yeah, but we have authority over all PAs, so.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, that's true.
There's two more questions and then we need to make a decision. Jimmy, then Mr. Rogers.
I just wanted to speak up and provide context for this because I'm the one who does our CMEs. So looking at their website and the courses that they are offering, they are not offering CME. They are not offering any type of category 1, 2, 3 as certified by the AMA or by AMDG. Those are the two entities that we look at, which are national entities. It doesn't have to be done by state. If you go to California and take a course on pain management and it's a category 1 AMA certified, then it works in Washington. They do not do that. They do continuing education units, and it's a hands-on it's more of a clinical, I took this course, I can do this procedure kind of now. But this is considered CEU and not CME, just as a little bit of context for everyone.
Thank you for that, Jimmy. Mr. Rogers.
I was just going to seek some clarification from the AG in this matter. I do not know the specifics and details of the law, but it seems that if this is public information, our inquiry might be limited to whether the entity that's asking is entitled to have that information, as opposed to what the content of what they intend to do with it. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. And I just want to make sure that if we do deny this, that we're doing it for the appropriate reason, as opposed to some impermissible reason like content based.
Yeah, the statute, the Public Records Act just says that it is limited to professional associations and educational organizations. It doesn't really look at content that is approved by you. So, and then the definition for educational association that you historically used is an accredited or approved institution or entity which either prepares professionals for initial licensure in the healthcare field or provides continuing education for healthcare professionals. Oh, there you go.
So if an entity meets that definition, are we still allowed to deny a request based on our belief that we disagree with what information they intend to send or what they intend to do with that information?
That is not a consideration within the statute or within your definition.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, so it's time to make a decision. Dr. Curry has offered a motion that we delay and ask for more information. Do we have a second for that?
I'll second. This is Dr. Trescott.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Raise your hand.
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. So Amelia, we can sit down and craft with Drs. Curry and Mr. Lopez and Dr. Trescott and Dr. Chung additional questions, asks for clarification.
Okay, thank you.
Heather, you had a second request?
Yeah, the second one I'm hoping will be a little easier. So this is from Spectrum Healthcare Resources. They're asking for the physicians list. They state that they're a professional association. However, it appears they're a recruiting organization for federal government and DoD. And when looking at the definition of professional association, it doesn't appear that they fall within that definition. So I would recommend denial.
Move to deny.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor of denying the request, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Okay, next item on the agenda. Request for addition to approved office-based procedures entities list. Who's speaking to this?
I can speak to it if you'd like.
Thank
So
you.
we have this approved list of accrediting entities. It is part of your office-based surgery rule that you have to approve these accrediting entities to be added to the list that is on this document, this procedure document here. And so I'm going to open that document so that you can see the list that's already there. These are the current approved entities that you have approved to be added. They are requesting to be added to this list. And they did use the appropriate steps to do so.
Any questions for Amelia? Dr. Curry?
Of course, I have a question. Sorry. Are other states using them? I mean, I looked through their materials and it looks good. I just kind of want to know that we're not the first people ever to say yes.
That I don't know. I did not do any research on them, so I'm not sure if they are or not.
Dr. Trescott?
Yes, of course, I have something to say too. This list is fine. What I'm wondering, we have had several cases where people are doing office-based procedures and have gotten in trouble with anesthesia and stuff. And do we routinely check that they're accredited when we get these cases? I don't remember us verifying that that their offices are accredited to be doing this work.
I'm adding Mr. Farrell to the chat because I don't know the answer to that. Hopefully he's available.
Mike?
I am. Yes, Dr.
Thank you.
Trescott. Yes, we do. We have a case right now where we're doing exactly that, where we have something that happened in physician's office, and we're making sure we're checking to see if they're accredited. So in investigations, we do that.
Great. Thank you. And have we found some that have not been accredited? Or are they all? Oh, we have. So we could lean on them for that as part of our disciplinary. Okay. Thank you.
Any more comments or questions? If not, can we have a motion to approve this?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Amelia.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike.
Proposed commissioner recusal procedure for managing conflicts of interest.
So Kyle's going to present on this one.
Okay.
Good morning again, everybody. This was something that we put through at a previous meeting, and you all had signed off and said this looks good, etc. We sent it over as what's called a policy, which has a certain meaning within the Administrative Procedures Act. I'm sorry. Oh, and the secretary, as you can see in Amelia's note, the secretary's office doesn't believe that it actually constitutes a policy, and then in fact it should be regarded as a procedure. Again, so the change that you see largely is just I'll say cosmetic. That's maybe not their greatest way of talking about it, but it simply takes the substance of what was previously approved and converts it into a procedure.
So it basically
So-
changes the title of it, not the substance of it.
More or less, I think that that's a fair way of putting it. And again, you know, the gist of this is making sure that commission members that we're offering you a resource to look at when you think that you might either have a direct conflict of interest or you might think recusal is from the disciplinary process or licensing process might be appropriate because you know somebody or because you work in the same system or because you know, say one of the patients or something like that. And again, the focus moved from a very kind of rote, these are the instances in which you must do this to allow the commission members a little bit more flexibility. And it really does focus on you kind of volunteering or affirmatively raising your hand and saying, I think that there might be an issue here from either a conflict of interest standpoint. That's probably pretty rare because that usually involves a financial interest. But more to the point from an appearance of fairness perspective. And in those instances, again, the procedure now strongly encourages you to have a conversation with either myself or Rick or Mike in terms of what the appropriate standards are. And again, I'll just say this in everybody's interest. I would really err on the side of recusing yourself if you think that there's any sort of issue. I think that that's the best way of going about this. So again, the substance is largely the same. We're moving this into a procedure as opposed to a policy. Questions?
Heather?
Dr. Gallinger, go ahead.
Oh, that's Harlan. I'm sorry, Dr. Gallinger.
Yes, I don't think I was at the meeting when this was first discussed, but my request would be for the third chapter, or the third paragraph of the first page of this, which in our meeting packet, losing sight of it, ends with the sentence that of a known relative or of a business or professional associate. I would really strongly encourage to be added or competitor. Because I think that's where the commission has been seen as being biased. And I think that's a really important piece that's missing if this is going to be a self-enforced thing. The second comment generally I would make is, since this is going to be a procedure and where this is most common, is it probably needs to be tightened up to be clear on. It's not like you're in the middle of a panel discussion that all of a sudden you're gonna be like, oh, stop, I need to talk with Kyle. That probably doesn't make sense. I mean, it should be somehow clear, like, hey, because oftentimes you don't identify until midway through the presentation, like, oh wait, I know this person, I need to recuse myself. And so it should be just clear about that. And I think it as a procedure, it seems kind of clunky and kind of missing the point about why we're trying to create this.
So Harlan, I can address a part of that, I think, but then I'll turn it over to your colleagues to talk about that. Conflict of interest has a very certain meaning within our world in state government, and generally conflict of interest, when you look at the statutes that are actually in place, deal with specifically a financial interest. And you see that outlined. The original language here is from Dr. Pam Kohlmeyer. Where I think you're where I think you're more focused, I think is more on the concept of appearance of fairness. And that's something that's dealt with kind of toward the tail end. And so we had to kind of break those apart because the standards for a conflict of interest are very clear in both state government with regard to the laws that are in place. Appearance of fairness is a much looser concept. And it's been historically defined in a couple different ways. And you see at the very beginning of the proposed now procedure, talking about, you know, the way the courts have looked at it. And so I understand that it can be a little bit nebulous, and it's not something that, you know, you folks deal with in your regular professional lives, right? It just isn't. Conflict of interest probably is, but appearance of fairness is not something that, you know, you dealt with when you were generally in practice. And so addressing both of those prongs, it was a little bit of a challenge in kind of putting this through, but it's really meant to strongly encourage you to have a discussion about whether or not you feel like there is an issue that's going to preclude you from being seen as a fair and impartial arbiter of the issues that are in front of you. So again, I don't have a problem if the rest of the commission wants to go back and add the phrase competitor to the last section of paragraph 3. Again, this has been, I think, this has been a process to try and educate people, but it's also been a process to get something put pen to paper in this regard. So that's more explanation than recommendation. I'm perfectly happy to listen to other people, and obviously the rest of the commission, not just commission members, but staff, if they want to talk about the issue that you're raising.
Comments? Questions? Dr. Trescott.
I'm a little concerned at putting competitor in here, that sometimes we have a profession where we don't have a lot of options about who will be on the panel, and to have the expertise, we need that person on the panel, and anybody in the same county may be seen as a competitor. And I was also wondering if pecuniary interest wouldn't be covering that, if I know what pecuniary means, which I'm not sure I do. Wouldn't that cover competitors?
It would seem.
And more exactly, like if you have a financial interest in this, you should recuse yourself.
That's really, Dr. Truscott, what that's getting at, and it means, you know, in the case law that surrounds this area of statutes. So again, I'm talking about the very strict conflict of interest statutes. What they're talking about is if you're making a decision as a commission member, you shouldn't be doing it to benefit yourself or a known relative or a business or professional associate. So if we're saying we want to grant a contract, which we don't typically do, but again, we're talking about state law, which covers all state government. And you know that for some reason it's going to benefit your daughter-in-law or, you know, somebody like that, you should recuse yourself from participation. I think the issue that and I don't want to speak for Dr. Gallinger entirely here, but the issue that Dr. Gallinger is talking about deals with when the commission is looking at a disciplinary matter and a commission member, including an RCM, may be affecting the professional livelihood of somebody who ostensibly is a market competitor to them. You know, I will say also for the folks from the outside, when I've talked to people in professional associations or docs or opposing counsel, they don't really understand how anonymized our case review process is. And I've tried to explain to them that, you know, generally when you guys are in those Thursday meetings, there's only one person who actually knows who the individual respondent is that you're dealing with, ostensibly. Now, I think Dr. Gallinger is getting at is there may be instances where it becomes clear that you're talking about somebody and they know. And again, I would strongly encourage you to recuse yourself in those situations. But again, this is a policy that's really meant to help commission members. And so I'll leave it to you folks to discuss further.
Well, you know, that's the reason that this comes up in the middle of a meeting is we don't usually know who the person is unless someone recognizes some pattern that they may be somebody they know. So because it is anonymized, we don't know who these people are going into it. And it's pretty clear that when people become aware of it, they recuse themselves.
Yeah. And it doesn't matter that it's in the middle of the presentation. You know, it's as soon as you recognize a real or perceived conflict, you recuse yourself. That's the ethical thing to do. Christine Blake and then Dr. Curry.
I think it's wrapped up in the words personal, professional, pecuniary. So there's no financial, professional, or any kind of personal issues that you have. And as we were all saying, if you even know who it is, I have recused myself a couple of times because of the, well, first of all, one, knowing who that was because of the issue itself, but secondly, also when I wasn't sure, but felt that there was. So I think it's just a matter of recusing yourself for your own, the reason that you have, which is personal or professional. So I think putting the word competitor in is kind of maybe abrasive. I think that it's understood in the language. That's just my opinion.
Thank you. Dr. Curry.
Yeah, I completely agree with Christine. I think pecuniary covers the competitor aspect. And like we had in our conversation yesterday at panel B, I think Ed recused himself halfway through a presentation that we were making when he said, "Ooh, I think I recognize this person." So I think we all know when to do it. So I think this is a great policy or whatever we're trying to make it. And I wanted to make a motion if we're ready to move forward to change it from a policy to a procedure, or was it procedure to policy? God, I've lost track now.
Policy to procedure.
To procedure, yeah.
Yeah. So are you making a motion?
I am. I'm making a motion to change it from a policy to a procedure as requested.
I would second that.
Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? One opposed. Thank you, Dr. Gallinger. Motion carries. Okay, on to the policy committee report. Ms. Blake?
Yes, let me see if I can make up some time for everybody here with my report. Thank you so much, Amelia, for prompting what needs to be done here with this group. I facilitated a huge meeting this morning at the hospital, and then I get here and I'm like, are we approving? Are we motioning? So thank you. So anyway, as you can see, I think you have it up, right? Yes. So I see the clinical experience assessment, Amelia, when I pulled up on another screen here on my computer for our initial review. If you could maybe scroll down on there. So at the policy committee meeting, you can see that we had a discussion that it could not be a policy, but we agreed to confirm the information before this meeting that we have here today. So Amelia did find out that the document can be a policy, but we deferred the decision to here, including the proposed changes, which now requires review and a vote for you to decide on the approval. So hopefully everybody had an opportunity to take a look at these before today's meeting. Are there any questions or comments on this one?
I don't see any, Christine.
Okay, so hearing none, I think on this one, Amelia, we needed a motion.
Correct.
May I have a
Okay.
motion?
Go ahead, Christine.
May I have a motion to approve as noted with the changes as you see?
Motion to approve.
Any seconds?
Second. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. The next, let me go down. Oops, sorry, I've got a cat on my laptop all of a sudden. Next, we have proposed guidance document on communicating diagnostic test results and time critical information for patients or practitioners. So as you can see, this document combined two current guidance documents. And the committee recommended approving the document and rescinding the two current documents. Does anyone have any questions or concerns on this?
I see none.
Okay. The committee then recommends approving the proposed document and rescinding the two current, if everyone's in favor.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Next, we have the guidance document processing complaints against licensees
Miss Blake,
enrolled.
Miss
Oh,
Blake,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
you need to finalize the vote.
Oh, fine. I thought we were just recommending approval. So may I have anyone not in favor of recommending approval of the communicating diagnostic test results? Okay, thank you. Next is the guidance document processing complaints against licensees enrolled in WPHP. There were two amendments made to this document, which hopefully you've had an opportunity to take a look at. Are there any questions or concerns with regard to this document?
I see none.
Okay, we recommend approval as presented with the 2 amendments as noted made on page 3. Is everyone in favor of approval of this document? Do I have any opposed to this document, actually? All in favor?
Raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Our next document is the guidance document, completion of death certificates by physicians and PAs. As you can see, we had another revision here. We did have some discussion about this one. If there are there any questions or concerns with regard to this guidance document? It's definitely been revised. So if everyone had an opportunity to take a look at it. Are there any concerns or questions, clarifications? I think Dr. Chapino's here, if there are any. I'm not sure. Kyle has his hand up.
Thanks, Ms. Blake. This is not relevant to the exact procedure, but I have asked staff, Jimmy and Gina, to consider starting to put together at least a short CME that would be sponsored by the commission for free to licensees, because this is such an area of, I think, confusion and lack of knowledge about what's actually required on the part of licensees. And so while that doesn't necessarily directly talk about this, we are going to take some steps to kind of get the word out to a wider audience. I know you all see these cases come through CMT pretty regularly, and we're going to try and take some steps to hopefully limit that flow of folks who have arguably in one of the worst times of their lives struggling with bureaucracy. So again, it doesn't go directly to this, but I did want to mention that for the benefit of the rest of the commission.
Thank you, Kyle. Are there any concerns regarding this document or questions? I don't see any. Did you see any, Terry?
Nope, I see none.
Anyone not in favor of recommending it as noted?
All in favor, raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. I believe that concludes the policy committee report.
Thank you, Christine.
Thank you all.
Are there any member reports from commission members?
Oh, Dr. Domino is here.
Yeah, I just want to say I'm sorry about missing most of the meeting. There was a huge windstorm and power has been knocked out all over this part of Maui. And there are trees down all over the roads. It was quite a while to get to the hotel. At least they have auxiliary power that allows for their internet to be working. So I apologize. Thank
No
you,
problem.
Terry, for running this. I was trying to get in touch with people and like the emails wouldn't go out, could email from the phone and the phone didn't really work. And anyway, it was a problem, but hopefully people are safe over here. I don't know. There were a whole bunch of trees down and it's not easy to get around on a lot of these roads because of the closures. Anyway.
Well, we're glad you're okay.
Yeah, it was just dark. Dark. People are talking about leaving because when it gets dark at 5:30, I mean, I don't think the power is going to come on in Kihei and Wailea for a long time. I mean, there are trees everywhere, but we'll see. Anyway.
Wow.
One thing on the reports that I noted on the February credentialing freeze, I've put the word out to the Peace Health facilities that the licensing and credentialing system will be unavailable on Friday the 14th until Wednesday the 19th. So applications and renewals should be done as soon as possible to avoid delays. I don't know how many folks have push that out to their organizations or are aware of that.
Yes, thank you, Christine, for reminding us. Any other commissioner reports?
I always appreciate all the cases we get from legal as well. Those are very interesting. Thanks.
You're
Staff
welcome.
member reports are on pages 147 to 159. Are there any additional reports? Amelia?
Thank you, Dr. Murphy. I just wanted to call attention to the informational documents that are included in this packet. And one of them was a Board of Optometry comment on one of our proposed interpretive statements. And that interpretive statement is regarding the definition of qualified physician. So I just wanted to make sure that the commissioners read that because that will be brought forward, I'm sure, in the future to policy committee as well as a business meeting. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. That's the very last page of the packet. Kyle?
Nothing other than to highlight that we do have a lunch and learn this afternoon that starts in about a half an hour or so. Micah and Marissa have worked many times over the years with Dr. Stan Fleming, and he is one of the folks who has taken the most interest in IMGs and integrating them into our physician workforce. And so he's graciously agreed to come and present kind of his perspectives on those efforts. I know that there are a number of bills that are still pending or coming up in the legislative session, but this was again reviving the lunch and learns was something that the executive committee in particular felt was an important part of the meeting cycle. And so again, in about a half an hour or so, Dr. Fleming will join us. I hope everybody is able to attend. I think it's safe to say that there are a lot of changes in the delivery of healthcare, and international medical grads are going to play a key role in that. And so please join us in a half an hour to listen to Dr. Fleming. Micah, I don't know if you or Marissa want to add anything to that.
Yeah, just to provide some specificity, Dr. Fleming works with Pacific Medical Group, and they are by far the largest users of the clinical experience license that was created in 2021 to provide IMG's recent clinical experience. And so that's really what he's going to be detailing for us. He may give you some advice as far as what changes need to happen. You should be aware that there's already been a bill introduced to revise the requirements of that license. And just briefly, it's to remove the 12 months of Washington residency, remove the USMLE Step 3 requirement to align it with what it takes to go through ECFMG, and increase the number of renewals that are allowed. Currently, there's only one renewal allowed for a total of 4 years, and they want to increase it to 3 to allow for a total of 8. So that's the context that you should be aware of. And if we're and Dr. Trescott's got a comment, and if we're done with this, I did have one piece of context to add, late breaking with respect to that death certificate issue.
Dr. Trescott?
Oh, I just want to know, are we going to be at the same Teams site for the lunch and learn, or do we have a different sign in?
There's a click on the agenda on the meeting materials.
Okay.
There's a click right there.
Okay.
So you have to open that session.
All right.
Micah, you had something else to say before we go to the AG report?
Correct. So you just approved the guidance document for the death certificates, and the pre-filed bills just posted, and I checked one that relates to this, and what it does is it introduces a new item of unprofessional conduct in the UDA, which is failing to timely produce a report of death as required by RCW 70.58 A.200 2 or more times in a calendar year. So they are trying to make not completing this unprofessional conduct. So just so you're aware.
Thank you for that. Okay, I think we're ready to go to Heather for the AAG report.
I have nothing to report today, so keep it short.
Okay.
Thanks, Kyle, for putting the budget information in there too. That was helpful.
Yes, thank you. Okay, if there's anything to say for the good of the order, say it now. Hearing none, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.